It's 5:15. I'd like to call this regular meeting to order. Welcome everybody in the audience tonight. Would you please stand and recite the pledge with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on to letter B, school board norms. Greg?
Sure. The norms are to share, and, am I on?
Yep. Just might bring it closer.
Okay, hear me now?
Yep.
To share and respect varied opinions and speak with a united voice once a decision has been reached. To prudently prioritize resources in a student-centric manner that aligns with the district's strategic plan. To exhibit a mindset of continuous improvement through adequate preparation for meetings and a commitment to board education. And to commit to assisting board effectiveness to ensure high-quality governance for the staff, students, and community of Jamestown.
Thank you, Greg. We have nothing under public communications. Any conflicts of interest to declare? Bob?
When we approved the James Valley Current Technology Center agreement, I could possibly have a conflict of interest there.
Okay.
No, you'd have to vote two.
Two. We just noted that it is a conflict, and then he won't vote. Any other conflicts at this time? Gail?
It would be similar to his. I'm an employee of Montpelier School District as well when it comes to voting on.
That's on the agreement too, so Montpelier is?
They are part of
For
the original agreement.
JDCTC.
Yeah. They're not being added on. It would just be a
Correct.
continuation.
I don't think.
Heidi?
So I don't know if that would.
I vote to allow Gail to vote on it, but Montpelier's not even on.
Okay. A motion? Is there a second? Seconded by Aaron. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on to consent agenda. Motion to approve. Motion by Bob. Seconded by Diane. Any discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving into our regular agenda, we have nothing under recognition or correspondence. Moving into reports, we have the health insurance report. Bob or Heidi?
Yeah, Bob did a nice job providing you with some information. Just a couple updates. The board just needs to be aware of our MOU and how it impacts our budget. And the fund balance is decreasing, so expenditures are above the revenue right now. The committee, Health Insurance Committee, needs to consider premium and plan design changes, and that's something that they do every year, so we're going to have to look at that. And there will be some tough decisions ahead, but the good news is everyone is coming to the table and looking at all options to reduce the expenditures or increase the revenue, and then we'll just continue to keep the board updated as we move forward.
Okay. Thanks, Heidi. Moving on to, is there any questions on the health insurance report or none? Okay. Moving on to the superintendent's annual report. You want to touch on that, Rob, or is that?
Well, it's there for your information. You've had a chance to review that. We do this same document every year. We think it's a really important document that houses a lot of information, and I'll tell you the same joke I tell you every year. It's called the Superintendent's Annual Report, but a lot of people, I write the foreword and a few pieces, and a lot of people do a lot of work in gathering information for all of you and for the public, so all of that really good information is in one document for people to view. Just maybe to point out two things. The first, kind of an unusual year, as we all know. And one of the big changes relates to assessments. We don't have historical assessment data for last year because we didn't have state assessment due to the pandemic. And so we're always going to have this gap year. I just wanted to bring that up to it for everybody's attention, so we know that we don't have assessment data in there for the last year, and that's why, related to the pandemic. The other item I want to note was actually a really good question that Mr. Roberts had earlier related to, it was on page 44 of the Superintendent Annual Report. It's special education student ratios, and the question was, well, why is there such a discrepancy at the elementary level? And, should we have a target for what that ratio should be, students to staff ratio? And really the reason why that looks different, and of course, if we did that this year, this would look a little bit different. As you know, we moved some staff around. We changed FTE at different buildings to try to balance out caseload. So this year would look a little bit more compressed. But what you see there is the difference between 13.3 students per FTE at Gustner Elementary, which did receive an additional half-time FTE, so that would decrease a little bit. And then down to 7 at Washington. And the question is, well, why is the discrepancy so big? And the one point I would make to that is it's really hard to do a comparison there because some students need more care and support than others. We might be devoting 1 or 2 students to some staff members because the needs are so great. And in other buildings or in other situations, we may not be devoting nearly as much time. So that's part of that discrepancy. I think moving staff around is another. In terms of what should a target ratio be, I'm just not sure we should be looking at a target ratio for special ed in that same manner. Not that we shouldn't continue to look at it and monitor, but setting a firm number is challenging because of those needs. The needs vary by student. We have, like I said, very significant needs with some students and less significant needs for others that probably don't need the same level of care. But I will say, 7 to 13.3 is something that we want to continue to monitor because that is a fairly large discrepancy, and that's something that I'd be interested to see looking at this year's staffing and how that correlates to last year, although there is an ebb and flow as students come in and out of the district. That I think we should be cautious of as well. And one thing to note, when we enroll new students, whether they are kindergarten students or students new to our district, one of the first questions we ask is, are there special needs with the family? So we can place appropriately. We try not to overburden our buildings with needs, whether that's EL or special education. We try to balance those loads the best that we can. While still prioritizing that we want students to go to their neighborhood schools. So some of that is all interwoven into that particular question with ratios. But with that, I'd be happy to stand for questions for any of other questions related to the superintendent's report.
No questions? Okay, moving on to the superintendent's report then.
Now the actual.
The actual.
Monthly. Superintendent.
Oh, Heidi?
That's linked on our website, right? That the full report, right? We can, yeah.
Yeah, so every year that would be posted on the website. People can view that document in its totality.
I just think that if somebody's new moving to our district, that would be, if I were moving to a district, that would be something I would look at on a website. So I think that's good to have that.
Oh, Amy?
So if somebody wanted to link that, we do have hard copies in the front office.
It is available.
Okay, one of the recommendations I'll be making, or I am making here for the instructional plan review team, we've been pretty consistent with the direction that we've been going. We still think it's important for our review team to gather data and review that data on a regular basis. But it would be my recommendation that we only bring a change back to the board moving forward, because I think we have seen the trajectory of where we're going. And I think that I'll continue to update the board on what our numbers are, but not necessarily a recommendation to the team. They'll only meet if a member of that team wants to meet. We'll still send them the data every other week. But if one of those team members feels a change is necessary, we would convene a meeting face-to-face and then make a recommendation if there's a change to the board. But I think as we've, like I said, continued that trajectory, we're in a place where I think that that's reasonable to do so. Again, we've continued to see a really slow decline in our numbers. We spike every once in a while, but I think we're in a very good place, and all the credit in the world to our staff for continuing those mitigation strategies that we know to be effective, and they've done a great job and continue to do a great job, even though it's hard. It's been hard for our staff to continue to work through these strategies, but they have done just an excellent job. We're very appreciative of them. Moving down in my report, it's that time of year where we start to look at hiring. One of your primary responsibilities as a board is to finalize those personnel contracts for certified staff. It's a challenging spot for board members because you aren't involved in the interview process. And so one of the ways that we connect you, or we try to connect you to those people that we're recommending, is the short bios. And so one of the recommendations that you'll have later on in the agenda is Denise Wood. And she is, as I've stated in the bio here, is coming to us from most recently California and Massachusetts. And I know that Mr. Gaylor is extremely excited after that interview to offer a contract to Denise Wood. So we're very pleased to bring that up for you later in the agenda. Also later in the agenda, you'll be asked to approve the facility plan and the school construction approval forms. Those are requirements from the Department of Public Instruction within certain parameters prior to projects. And so we have to get that done. I was hoping to have our fitness, performance, and wellness space included in that initial, but we'll just have to revise it or drop the new one because we aren't ready to go down that road yet. And so this would just be for the turfed facility. In capital projects planning, we've been working, Mike Barsness is here from Consolidated Construction, and he'll do a CMAR, board education, and then roll into the capital projects plan and give you an update there. Sally Jerome, who's our facilities coordinator, and myself had really a great meeting the other day. It was a long meeting. I think, was it 4 hours, Mike? About 4, 3.5, 4. And we worked through priorities, setting priorities, plotting out our needs over the next 10 years, moving things back and forth within that capital projects plan. And what's become challenging with that, even more so than normal, is trying to figure out ESSER dollars and what should be the appropriate amount to devote to capital projects with ESSER dollars. And we kind of settled in, if you remember, those 3 buckets. So continuing those projects that we've started and addressing needs in the pandemic that have continued, that's one bucket. Second bucket is building infrastructure, all those short-term, long-term needs, and then educational innovation. So in those 3 buckets, what I really focused around is we know that we have to do 20% for learning loss. That's in that first bucket. So 20% devoted there, 70% to capital projects, those long-term infrastructure needs, and then 10% to educational innovations. And that's what we built the capital projects plan around, was 70% of ESSER. So a pretty substantial amount of those federal dollars, those one-time dollars, and I think that's the best way that we can spend those dollars is looking towards those future needs. And we'll talk about that more when it comes. The other thing that I want to draw your attention to with the capital projects plan, I had a plan of how I was going to present the capital projects to the board. And as I think about it, I think there's a better way, probably a better way to make that presentation and those recommendations to the board. Originally, we were going to present them all, and it's a pretty weighty document to look at. But what I'd like to do, what I think makes the most sense, is to get one more set of eyes. I already shared that Sally, Jerome, Mike Barsness from Consolidated, and myself, we looked through and prioritized. I think we should refer, my recommendation to you is later on in the agenda, when we review the capital projects plan, that you refer it to the facilities committee. That's Diane, Aaron, and Jason, to take one more set of eyes to that plan, prioritize again. We can share with you why we prioritized what we prioritized in those years, and then bring that back to the board for final approval, and that will include this summer. So that'll be the summer projects that we're looking at for this year. And so that'll make a little bit more sense for those facility committee members to see where all of those dollars are spent, and you'll dig in a little bit. But I think it'll be good, like I said, to have one more set of eyes, another perspective on that plan. And then when we're bringing that recommendation back to the board, it's been vetted by all the perspectives that we need to. So that'll be my recommendation moving forward. And I do think it was actually Mike that had a really good idea with the capital projects plan, is building in contingencies. We did that with the old summer projects. We built in some contingencies. I think there's a lot better way. Mike had a great idea on how to do that, and that's built in to the summer, or the contingencies are built in by area into the every one of those schedules. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more when Mike shows. But that's a much better way to do that, and we can kind of marry our old summer projects into this capital projects plan. The idea then would be for the capital projects to flow through that facilities committee annually. We make that, we update that capital projects plan. That comes to the board, and that kind of replaces the summer projects process. And again, just a way to get multiple perspectives on that, and that plan gets updated then every year. So that'll be my recommendation there. I wanted to quickly brief you on the ending fund balance. You set a target last year, I think it was in April, of 13% as an ending fund balance, and it was 10.9%. We didn't have a timeline. We didn't say by 2025 it was going to be 13%. But you wanted to, you made the motion to move and to get that to 13%. So you were at 10.9% last year, you're at 10.9% this year. To make an apples to apples comparison, we did remove the ESSER dollars, because that's not really if you're looking at trying to make a true analysis of what your ending fund balance is, we removed ESSER from those years to make sure that could be done consistent. So I do want to point out, of course, that the ending fund balance has grown because our expenditure budget has increased, but it's the same percentage. So it's still 10.9%, even though our projected ending fund balance is higher. And I will say projections are projections. I can't reinforce that enough. There's a lot of time between now and June 30th, and we're trying to do our best guess. And so that number could be higher, that number could be lower, but we're currently projecting that amount at 10.9%. I want to also update the COVID leave bank. It's been used. I'm certainly glad that we have it. I think as of today, it was somewhere around the mid-90s for use. And that's been, I gave you a breakdown of all the different leaves. That's 16 requests. There haven't been any that have been denied. We're waiting on documentation for some, but none have been denied. They've all been approved that have come through. And we do have, well, I think as of today, I think there's 5 pending requests for that are just pending documentation. I think it's around 94 days. And as I talked about in the past, this is a good example of why we look at local data and not just focus on county and state, because regardless of what happens outside of our school district walls, we need to focus on what's happening here, because we do see impact. Just because we have a handful of positive active cases, the impact in the school could actually be substantially higher. We see a greater impact from a percentage comparison right now than we were seeing in December with staff. So it's something we just need to continue to monitor, but I'm certainly happy that we have the leave bank available. I think it's made a difference for families and that's in our staff. That's certainly been a good thing. I'll talk about the Career and Tech Center agreement, but I did note the changes 3.06, 6.05, and section 6.10 that are the significant changes to that agreement, but they're all redlined. I think other than that, a lot of legislative updates are pretty consistent. The only thing I'll point out is Senate Bill 2196, which is the competency-based bill, did pass pretty overwhelmingly in the House. So that's good news. That'll be, I'm sure, signed into law by Governor Burgum in the near future. So that's a real good positive update there. But other than that, I would stand for questions.
Any questions for Rob? Aaron?
As a part of that, I guess, the COVID committee, have you had any discussions or anything related to the operational plan side of it as opposed to the instructional plan?
No, not other than that group really just focuses on what the numbers are in the recommendation for instructional plan. They haven't been charged with operational things. That would be part of the health and safety plan. But personally, my recommendation to the board would be continue as it is, at least through this year. Or through this year, I should say.
Yep, go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to have maybe a more open discussion on the instructional plan, specifically with the mask mandate. I guess I have some growing concerns of other side effects within the school as far as negative conditions, I guess I'll say. And I guess I'd like to just be open and transparent with the community as far as, what rationale for maintaining it or getting rid of it, either way. And I think I'll just make a recommendation that we have that as an agenda item for our next board discussion.
I was just going to suggest that to have the appropriate place for that would be to bring the health and safety plan back to the board as an agenda item, discussion held, and move forward. One thing I would, and I think I brought this up in the past, one thing to remember about the mask mandate is the orders for quarantine and the differences between those, the close contacts, and the impact that does have. But I think, again, that come up as an agenda item, we can have that discussion.
Any other questions for Rob? None? Okay, moving on to board education. We have the construction manager at risk, Mike Barnes.
Everybody hear me all right? Or should I carry this thing around? Probably both hours.
Yeah, not quite used to.
All right.
Oh, need more batteries. Need batteries.
Want me to go without it? Can you hear me? Or? Yeah. Okay. I'm not known for being real church mouse like, so I think I can probably get my point across here. Thanks for having me tonight. My name's Mike Parsons. Jim Harris was unable to be here this evening. And what I was hoping to run through the board tonight was, number one, talk a little bit about why construction management, and then additionally touch a little bit on the topics for how Dr. Leck stated earlier with capital maintenance planning that we've been working with Rob and Sally and Jerome on. So, what I'd hope to be able to, demonstrate tonight is why construction management. We'll talk a little bit about the history of construction management and the benefits or considerations versus a couple of different delivery methods for construction. We'll touch briefly on some of the capital maintenance updates that we've done with, some of the budgeting and prioritization with ESSER dollars and things like that. We'll have some suggested next steps and then a chance for questions or discussion at the end. That being said, if you've got a question, if something while I'm running through this doesn't make any sense, please let me know and I can address that question for you. Real quickly about me, Mike Barsness. I'm actually a Valley City kid, just down the road, high school graduate, NDSU, and I've been doing this for 32 years. I'm reminded that the first construction project I ever worked on was here in Jamestown, up on the hill at one of the churches. So it's always fun to get back a little bit here. I've served most of my clients now as a director of pre-construction services, which means I help a lot of our clients get from the very beginning stages of a project or capital maintenance planning, things like that, and just help provide the guidance from those years of construction experience with estimating and project management of larger commercial projects. A little bit about Consolidated Construction. We were actually founded in Langdon, North Dakota in 1950, and we currently serve our customers in offices in Bismarck, Rapid City, South Dakota, and Appleton, Wisconsin. We do specialize with 32, we've got 32 North Dakota school districts as current clients since 2013. Most Class B, 3 Class A's. And 85% of those projects have been addition and renovation projects. We like to pride ourselves on using what you've got and making best use of your existing facilities. We do specialize in facility planning and CMAR, and we were actually selected by Jamestown Public Schools in 2016 to do an initial capital maintenance plan to aid with some facility planning towards the fall 2018 vote. So that's actually where our capital maintenance journey with the school district started. Then in 2017, Consolidated Construction was actually hired as a CM at risk by the school district to prepare for that upcoming referendum. There were legal ads that were posted 21 days prior to submittal deadline per century code. And we went through the selection committee and request for qualifications. The CM submittals we were shortlisted for an interview at some point, later on in the process, and ultimately hired. And then we continued to work with the school district, Dr. Leck, and the design team at the time to help craft or strategize towards some projects for that last bond referendum, which unfortunately was voted as not yet by the city. So a little bit about construction management. Back in the 60s, there was a little bit of industry unrest. Actually, there was a lot of unrest in the country back in the 60s. Back then, it was mostly traditional design, bid, build. You had architects on one side, you had general contractors on the other. A lot of large projects, high inflation. Some of us can remember back that far. A lot of delays and a lot of change orders, and sometimes there were bad guys that were kind of associated with the project. In the 70s, kind of a new way was formed. It was actually set up to kind of put everybody on an even playing field. I like to call it a three-legged stool of a design team, a construction manager, and an owner. And the responsibilities were really developed to align with the owner interests. Get a construction person involved in the very beginning stages of a project, working hand in hand with that design team, and to replace kind of that traditional general contractor's role. An advantage of this is those individuals that are in at the very beginning, they're accountable for cost and time and quality outcomes, and it helped manage risk to the owners. Interestingly enough, the first project done under this development method, construction management method, was the World Trade Center Twin Towers back in the 70s. The CMAA today has numerous standards of practice. It's a widely accepted method of construction throughout the United States, 12,000 members. Several universities and are members, including NDSU. And there have now been industry standard contracts, including AIA and some of the other document systems that actually recognize the construction manager. Most of the architects in the state that we work with now actually really value bringing somebody in to just kind of help with some of the initial planning through there, and they've adjusted their contracts to go along with that. So a couple of real quick comparisons with traditional design, bid, build, general contracting. Typically, you don't get any pre-construction services from a contractor. He comes in after the plans are done to provide a competitive bid. There's century code requirements for that. The work is still legally advertised and bid, awarded to the low bidder, sometimes without qualification. As long as, in North Dakota especially, if you've got a contractor's license and all that, They're usually, as long as they're licensed and bonded, they're able to go. Sometimes it can be adversarial. It's a low bid gets the job type of scenario. And then North Dakota has taken a kind of step level. There's got 3 primes with the century code, which means you can have 3 prime contractors on a project, a mechanical, an electrical, and a general contractor. And sometimes that can lead to issues with, who's responsible for what, or one point of contact for that. It does save the owner some money from avoiding a general contractor markup, for mechanical and electrical, and it leaves kind of the 3 contractors to kind of coordinate with each other. There's an additional method of construction management called agency CM, and again, that construction manager might be selected by qualifications and fees. They will provide pre-construction services, and they will legally advertise and award all 100% of the construction work. But in this instance, those contracts, all those individual subcontracts are contracted directly to the owner, or in this case, a school district. So if you could potentially have 30, 35 individual subcontracts with the various entities for building, say, a new school or any type of project like that. Your CM in this instance serves kind of as a manager. He's trying to hold all those individual contractors accountable, but he's not really contracted for cost, quality, or scheduling. So, and then the bonding is also provided by all those subcontractors on that project. So, the third alternative, construction management at risk, and that's what I'm hoping to demonstrate to you tonight. Again, selected by qualifications and fees, providing the pre-construction services. 100% of the construction work is still legally advertised and bid per North Dakota Century Code guidelines. Low responsible subcontractors and contractors are selected. Your CM is licensed, insured, and bonded, and accountable for all work. And the way I like to say that is he's got skin in the game. He's responsible to those commitments that are made at the very earliest part of a project, just like a design firm, and just like you are as an owner of a project. I love this one. 90% of a project is determined in the first 10% of the timeline, and the reason for that is we make all the really big decisions at the very start. That's when we decide how big the building's going to be, what type of systems, mechanical systems, roofing systems, siding systems. Those are all things that really start at the very beginning of your project. And why would you not want to have all of your people, at the table, to decide, what your best course of action there. A real good example of that right now is what's going on with the structural steel bar joist and deck market right now. I've never seen it in 30 years. Right now, we've got deliveries out probably 6 months from date of order for something that typically used to take 8 to 12 weeks, from a date of order. So, with those types of examples of some of that knowledge in mind, sometimes you chart a course for a different direction, use a different building material, schedule your project differently, something along those lines to try and get ahead of some of that stuff. You can even do early bid packages, within Century Code guidelines to do that. So, project development scheduling is a big part of the time management that we do. How do we get from today or the beginning of any project to that point that we're actually breaking ground? There's board meetings to navigate, there's certain budget sessions and architectural design milestones that we like to tie together. And we'll actually help kind of navigate through all that stuff. You can pre-order long lead time materials under CM. We can actually issue early bid packages without waiting for the complete, design packet to be completed to try and get ahead of some of those timely issues there. Cost management is another big part of it. There's an example of an estimate there, and our whole goal there is so our clients know exactly where their money's going. And we'll track those estimates as we go through different phases of a project design or pre-construction timeline. It happens usually all the time where somebody will just say to me, Mike, I don't want to spend $100,000 on this. Can we redirect those dollars, back into our education and find another way? And that's a big reason why we like to do that. You can line item veto subcontracts if, and rebid those items later on. Sometimes that's hard under a general construction standpoint. Real quick, competitive bidding, Century Code is very clear. 100% of a project, whether under a CM or a traditional general contract, it's got to be bid out 100%. CM kind of aligns all those subcontractor bids into one funnel to kind of get them in. When you've got separate general contractors bidding, and I used to be from this world, sometimes you wouldn't get subcontractor B's bid, and some subcontractor C, didn't know you were out there, things like that. This kind of, we do a real good job of advertising locally and to regional subcontractors to make sure those bids all get funneled into the project to us so you as the owner can see the ultimate benefit there. From a quality control standpoint, plan reviews, builder's perspective from the very beginning, looking at plans as they're being developed, working with the team, setting up pre-installation conferences for really important things, roofing and windows, envelope issues, HVAC systems. Really, what I like to say is we really want to help set expectations and manage those expectations through the project in the very beginning there. Your best of class CM firms, and this is, I think, getting towards the end of the CM discussion here, but your best of class firms will have teams dedicated to focusing on educational facilities. It won't be a firm that does one project, one school here or one school there, that they work in the business and they do that. There will be proven leadership with getting through bond referendums or capital maintenance planning or community involvement, which could be community listening sessions, involving the local subcontractor and supplier pools, all those types of things. Proven results, positive references, and the number one thing is accountability. At the very beginning, your CM's at the table at the front. Everybody's accountable to those decisions. So, I'll segue briefly into our capital maintenance planning. As Dr. Leck stated, we do feel it would be better to run through a facilities thing to once again run through the requirements and the findings in the capital maintenance plan. Why capital maintenance planning at all? Well, number one, let's determine, our expected useful life of some of our systems. HVAC systems, roofing, and, any building envelope, siding or windows, things like that. Let's determine that useful life of that system, which might drive the useful life of that facility itself. Sometimes we can save some really costly emergency repairs early on by finding some things. And then we can help prioritize for funding and maybe level resources and expenses, which is kind of what we've been, asked to do with Dr. Leck and Sally and their team right now. The ESSER funding has been a new wrinkle in our capital maintenance program. I've probably built 15 or 20 of these plans for various school districts in North Dakota. You guys are the record. You've got 9 buildings in this one. I haven't had anyone with more than that. But the ESSER funding's been interesting, and there's an opportunity there for those investments to benefit the district, any district, long term. And and by being out front and understanding your facilities and the condition of those facilities, and maybe to prioritize some issues that are problems, you're perfectly prepared, to move forward with this stuff, with this plan. ESSER 2, we're, per the percentages, Rob's 3 buckets I laid out earlier, looks like there's about $1.5 million available for that. And then ESSER 3 is about $7 million available, which is a chunk of money for sure. Real briefly, your schools, 5 elementary schools ranging, Washington was originally built in 1929 and has 2 additions and renovations to it, ranging up to Louis L'Amour in 1989, which when you think about it is still 32 years ago. So, you know, several of these schools have been added onto over the years, but nothing real recently there. The middle school, we're here right now, 197,000 feet, again, built in 1923, several renovations and additions over the years. High school was built in 2004, North Alternative, and then we've got the James Valley Career Tech, which was built in 1978. Those are a little tough to see, at least from back where I'm at. Has everybody seen these numbers, or you probably got them on your pads here? Just
Yeah,
give
they
me
are linked in your agenda.
All right, so as Rob mentioned, what our challenge was to not only, we like to set these capital maintenance plans up in buckets, and we usually like to approach the first 2 years individually, given typical standard or what you typically spend in capital maintenance or building repairs fees. So 2021 and 2022, the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 columns we added to try and strategize on potential ways of capturing those dollars to use in priorities. And this is one example of how we could do that. The individual repairs or roofs or whatever that make up that might differ a little bit from the ones we used here, but the scheme is in general, you know, to try and utilize these dollars as shown. So for 2021, Rob's summer projects this year, we're targeting about $650,000. 2022 is larger because there's some funding requirements from the high school for the athletic facility. And Rob, you're, I'm losing the word.
We did have a refinance too, that we were looking at in 2022. Those projects looking to come online then, we're getting awfully late in the game to bid out some of those major projects to get done over the summer. So that would have to be pushed. And we also have in the recommendations for the plan, or at least in the prioritization, that holistic look at HVAC for Gusner. Originally, and I think I talked about this either last meeting or 2 meetings ago, that turned out, once you had engineers in, a bigger project, and really that ends up being an HVAC replacement. It gets damp down there, and it gets then smelly, and it's pretty challenging. And I struggle with the idea of spending $400,000, $500,000 in HVAC costs and not fixing the oxygenation and the odor that goes through there. And if you're going to make that shift, I really believe that you should be looking long-term to fix the whole issue and not just Band-Aid with the new boiler system there, because I think the issues are bigger than that. And then the total cost of that HVAC replacement was $1.8 million, if I remember correctly. So it's a pretty significant one. Again, you could do that in stages, but I think in a typical year, we would have to do it in stages. But if you can get that done at one time, there's some cost savings in there inherently with making those changes as part of a project, that you're bidding out other projects at the same time. I think it makes a lot of sense. And again, I just really struggle with addressing part of the issue and not addressing other parts of a connected issue when you have an opportunity to. Does that get you, Mike?
Yep, yeah, thank you. And, you know, along those lines, there's several different ways you can, replace that HVAC system in several different methods. And, an engineering firm can run you through some of those. We can also assist, studying some options as well. I've had projects where I've studied 6 different mechanical systems, both from initial construction cost down to 10-year, energy usage costs for different materials. So we can help in that regard. Long and the short of it here, over 10 years, and again, the whole purpose of a capital maintenance plan is to kind of compare your existing facilities to what a current, modern, educational facility is. You're looking, close to $36–37 million over 10 years. Now, it doesn't have to be in 10 years. It can be passed. We just use 10 years as a, purpose for forecasting the challenges that we see coming at you with roofs and ADA remodeling and safety and security and things like that. But this is a starting point. Sally actually has now, does have a modifiable capital maintenance plan that she can adjust as things come up on this plan and just update it, from a yearly basis.
Yep, go ahead, Rob.
Just to make a comment too, the last time the board approved a plan, it was, I think, around 27 million. And I think it's reasonable to ask the question, wow, it was 27 million 5 years ago. Why is it 36 million or almost 37 million now? Well, it's 5 years ago. And the other thing that's coming is that there were, like Mike talked about, their systems, they all have natural lives that you can anticipate a system lasting. And we're 5 years down that road again. And not only is it 5 years later and costs more to replace, it's also, it's 5 more years of life on that finite time period. And so some of those areas have to move up. Roofs is going to be a pretty significant cost over the duration of this plan. And we have to have a plan for how we're going to address those. There needs to be some kind of priority and timeline because they can't all hit us at once. If we don't start chipping away, that's going to be a pretty significant cost. If we don't start chipping away at window replacements, that's going to be a pretty significant cost. And I keep coming back to how fortunate we are that Esther came along when it did. We have an opportunity to devote an awful lot of dollars that would normally come from the public to do these projects. And we have an opportunity now to spend some costs or to devote some costs, and really pretty significant if you're looking at 70% of that allocation, $8+ million that we can devote to these projects.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. There were a few buckets. We added the Washington School back in the 2018 referendum. At that time, that school was going to be shut down. So we didn't have, there was $4 or $5 million in costs there that weren't in here. Like Rob said, we are 5 years down the road. There's some roofing assessment things that are starting to creep in that weren't in the assessment 10 years or 5 years ago into that 10-year thing. We did add some asbestos. It's primarily abatement costs for flooring and some things. We've kind of changed our stance on that over the last 5 years. I want you as a client to know when you've got, some of those asbestos products, floor tile, the stuff lasts forever. It's, but you should know that it's out there in case you do have to abate some of it or whatever. It's perfectly safe the way it is now. But we did, change our strategy a little bit on how we report some of that stuff, so.
And one other thing, Mike, that I wanted to mention that I referenced earlier, but that did increase cost, is the contingency. Like I said, it marries the summer project idea, or a lot of what we were trying to do in the summer projects with contingency dollars. Our boilers need to be inspected. We need roof inspections. Those annual maintenance, regular maintenance types of costs are now built into this plan. So that also kind of expanded the cost a little bit too. So I don't want you to get sticker shock and
Exactly, and there's some inflationary pressures from 5 years ago. We tried to keep the report as similar as to what it was 5 years ago, but we typically see in our industry 3–4% a year in inflationary costs, and so that's 5 years we've got to kind of catch up on here. So almost there. So this is just, and again, it's in your packets, it's just a school-by-school breakdown. And for the most part, you got a couple of your elementary schools that are up in the $80 per square foot range. And really, your issues at those schools are HVAC systems and some roofs that are coming due, and windows. Those are usually kind of the big three in systems that can sometimes sneak up and get you a little bit when those boilers get old. I mean, you've been doing a great job. You've replaced some boilers at Lincoln and Roosevelt, and but you've still got those old original mechanical systems then down the line there to deal with. So roofing's catching up, and you've got some window costs. The one school that's highlighted is Washington. He's up close to $150 now square foot, and I guess the question there is, do you continue to maintain the field and that elementary school moving forward? A lot of our clients, not all of them, but most of them, when we start getting in that $100 to $140 range of capital maintenance, they start to maybe consider alternatives, and so that's a decision for another time and another day. But that's really the question that I would ask myself moving forward there. So next steps, we're almost there. Again, to align with Rob, I think we want to confirm the priorities one last time, work with the facilities department, make sure, they understand how we're looking at it. There's many different ways that this can be approached. Engineering firms for plans and specifications, Rob, if the decision is to move forward with Gusner, start looking for some design options and maybe study some options on different HVAC systems to tie together.
One comment I want to make here is Consolidated Construction did go through that RFP process with us in 2016, and that agreement would still be in place if that was the desire of the board to continue. That's my recommendation. I think they have been through this with us for quite a while, and they're very knowledgeable about what our needs are as a district. They did go through that bid process, that selection process, I should say, and were selected by the board. That would be my recommendation to move forward, or just continue that process. You wouldn't need to do anything. That agreement is still valid. But that's what I would recommend to do.
Yeah, correct. Thank you, Rob. We are willing to honor that original agreement. It had a sliding fee scale based on size of project, which is an advantage to you. And we're willing to honor that and move forward. We're in this for the long haul too. I've got a lot of time invested in walking around these schools. I'd really like to see some of this come to fruition here. So. So along those lines, yes, please authorize CMAR. We're willing to help with our pre-construction services. We did talk, we're going to get an updated roofing assessment going. The last one was 5 years old. Especially with some of the summer projects here, it'd be easy to tackle some of those in case those guys see something. And that's something I recommend. Most of the roofers, especially the roofer you guys work with, Tecta, they'll do those roof assessments for a very low or even no fee, to keep you abreast of what's going on. And your roofs will, they're constantly changing. Study options and manage costs. Approve budgets. Once facilities decides the direction they want to go, we can help study some different options of products. Maybe a way of managing costs, like bundling, prices, like, bundling projects. So maybe window replacement on a couple elementary schools or 3, whatever can be done in the summer. Maybe buy some of that stuff in some larger, packets and see some savings to the school would be just one option. Sometimes if the projects are too big, maybe you want to split them up between a couple different contractors. So those are all things that we can help Rob and the district maintain. You guys all have your day jobs too. This is our day job. So, and of course, competitive bidding with anything that you may decide you want to do, with emphasis on local contractors, of course. So I've been up here talking here for the last 15, 20 minutes. Do you have any questions for me? What would make this a great meeting for you?
Any questions? Diane?
I was going back to the slide with the 10-year capital.
Oh, your mic, Diane.
Going back to the slide with the 10-year capital expenditures, I notice under security and safety, for instance, the middle school is the highest cost there at about $620,000. Can you give me an idea of what that would include? Is that where the windows are?
The,
Windows are in buildings repairs, building repairs.
Safety and security for the middle school? I think I was on the wrong sheet there. Okay, I got you. Yeah, I can tell you.
Well, because it's the highest cost under that
Oh,
column.
fair enough, fair enough. The middle school, we've got a number of stairs and rails in the facility that are out of code. They don't have the right run out on the rail, they don't have the right, they've got to be so much off of a wall, can't be bigger than a certain diameter, it can't be smaller. Sometimes at the bottom of a stair, they've got to extend out a foot past, sometimes they've got to extend a foot up at the top, they got to be at a certain height. There were a number of issues there. I think there's over 25 stairwells just in this facility that could use some updates there. Additionally, chair lifts for a couple of areas where elevators don't serve for small lifts. Hoyer lift, Rob's got some students coming that are going to need that in the future. And then potentially some ADA modifications in locker rooms and ADA ramps. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so specifically at the middle school actually for most of the schools in safety and security, a lot of it comes down to upgraded fire alarms and controlled entry, surveillance upgrades, things like that in that particular schedule. But this is one of the reasons I think because this is so big that we need another committee to just give eyes on and reprioritize because I think it's important to have that other set of eyes there. But for almost all the schools, fire alarm upgrade is I would say probably
Fire alarm and fire
50,
sprinkler.
60% cost of that schedule over the 10-year over the 10-year time.
Yeah,
At least
fire
that.
alarm and fire sprinkler is the primary, and and here's the skinny on fire alarm. I would say probably 80% of the schools in the state now are not current with the current fire alarm codes. It's got to be a voice evac system now. This is a new code. It just came out 4 or 5 years ago. Are the fire marshals all going to run out and make you swap all those out? No, they're not. But when you start looking at putting new fire sprinkler systems in to handle that, that's about the time you'd want to consider updating your fire alarm. A lot of times they can use the pipe and some of the devices and the wiring. A lot of times it's just new devices, things like that. But that's usually the time to marry all that together because those panels talk back and forth between sprinklers and fire. It also sometimes ties in with HVAC systems. Certain systems require smoke monitoring. And things in ductwork and fire dampers and things like that. So sometimes you can save costs on your mechanical systems just by installing a sprinkler system because then it eliminates the need for fire dampers, throughout your ductwork system.
So just to give you a sense of what the committee is going to end up looking through, there's a pretty significant file in Excel, and it breaks down by tab. By tab is the section. So security, building repairs, and then it's broken down in that tab by building, and then prioritized by year. And that includes, we separated, as Mike talked about, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. So those projects that we are devoting to the ESSERs fit into those two columns. So we separated them out because we didn't know what ESSER 3, it hadn't passed yet when we started this. It was still hope. And now that we know that that's passed, and now we're just really targeting an allocation because we know that ESSER 3 is going to be a reality. It's just going to be how much by the time it gets through and flows through the state and gets allocated to us, although we think we have a pretty good idea that it's the 9.8 million. But that's why we separated ESSER 2 and 3 differently because we were sure that ESSER 2 was going to happen. ESSER 3 was more of a hope at the time. But then it'll be broken down 2021, 22, ESSER 2, ESSER 3, and then 2023. And the reason we did it that way, and Mike talked about normally having just 2 years broken down. We did 3 because that's 2023 is when ESSER 3 needs to be spent by. So we felt it was important to break down those 3 years as opposed to 2. But it'll, like I said, we took about 4 hours doing this, and you'll probably take at least that over time, breaking it down again.
We've had 2 4-hour meetings.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it
just
was
in the
actually a
last
Zoom
month,
one too.
so
But
it's- yeah, Rob's right. The document is a little, there's a lot of numbers there and a lot of formatting. And, but I'm a numbers guy. I've built my career around it. And so I've enjoyed revisiting things and working through it. You know, the challenge now is to totally take advantage of you know, what's come down here and, you know, and try and improve your facilities and do it in a manner that, you know, maybe we can knock off a couple of other things, you know, sequentially at the same time. And that's really, you know, what it's all about.
Aaron?
So you stated in here a couple of times that you have a guaranteed budget, guaranteed schedule. So how do you budget for risk?
I'm sorry, how do I
budget for risk?
budget for risk? It's a good question. It depends on the project. We're very accustomed and we're typically hired, you know, consider, back in 2018, a bond referendum situation where school district goes out for a certain dollar amount. And, you know, we've got to be accountable to those decisions as well, too. We will use some contingencies based on risk and based on the type of a project. So, for instance, one I'm working on right now, we've got to tear a building off of an existing building, and there's going to be some soil issues there. I'm probably going to have a higher contingency amount in there to just make sure that we cover for that. But really, the number one thing is to have a very good plan going in place with design and understanding everything that's got to go into that thing and covering those risks. We're all accountable to whatever that dollar amount is that's allocated to that project or budget or whatever else. You know, in a referendum situation or even in a situation like this, there aren't any additional dollars there. So by using some contingencies, maybe bidding alternate type scenarios to try and manage that risk a little bit or manage that budget for some nice to haves, things like that. Those are usually some strategies we'll employ early on. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, you're giving me a better feel for it there. But as far as the contingency though, and then how does that come back to the school district in terms of responsibility?
Typically, there's usually a couple of different contingency buckets. I like to have the school district to have their own contingency bucket, and that is your funds to do with what you say, for what you use. A lot of times that can be for unforeseens or differing site conditions. Say you dig a foundation for something and you pull 5 car bodies out of there or something that wouldn't be known. That's there. We're mandated by our CM contract to carry a construction contingency ourselves. It's usually in the range of 3% of the cost. We fully identify that at the very start, and then every monthly board report, you'll have a report of contingency usage throughout that. Whatever's left at the end goes back to the school district. We don't share in any 100% of what we don't use goes back to the school district. There are some CMs or contract scenarios where they might share that. We don't believe in that. Those are education dollars. So we'll just account for that as the project goes through. Whatever's left at the end goes back to the school, no strings attached.
Any other questions for him, or?
Rob? Just, and maybe this is more a capital projects plan comment, but I feel like we're going down this road, and it might be most appropriate here. One of the things that I did adjust in the capital projects plan, and this will go through the committee, but I just want to discuss this with the whole board, at least bring the point up to the whole board. We had set aside $500,000 to do the wellness area, physical education wellness addition, and we know that that isn't going to be enough. We had a really nice plan. We thought that was going to be enough, and it really isn't. So you have two options. One is you make the space fit the dollars, or you recommit dollars to make the space that you want. In construction, in my experiences, I've never heard a lot as a superintendent that said, I wish we had spent less. It's usually, I wish we had that space the way we initially wanted it. And in the capital projects plan, we devote in this draft that'll go to the committee, $850,000, because that's what, in talking with Consolidated, they felt would be needed to make that space viable. And I'm just wanted to be upfront about that. And again, everything's going to flow through the committee. If the committee says we're recommending a different cost, or we want to do something different, then that is what it is. But I'm just being upfront with the board about the fact that that dollar amount changed in our proposal or in this draft, because ultimately I think the space is needed. And I would rather devote a few more dollars when we have the ESSER dollars coming to us to do that project right than do it halfway and not get the space that you really feel is necessary. And again, flows through the committee, but I just wanted to make the full board aware of that as well.
Heidi?
Yes, I'd like to, I know a lot went into, a lot of stakeholders went into developing a plan for that space. I think the number of students that use that space, I think we need to look at making it adequate size. If you build it too small, it's just not going to serve the need that we want it to serve. And in addition to that, down the road, if we could also put somewhere in that plan, I'd like to see some like bathrooms with some outside access and or concessions on that end. I realize anything that deals with plumbing and electrical is going to be very expensive, but if the committee could look at that down, at least down the road, I'd appreciate that.
That actually is in there. It actually is in. We had a discussion about that as well, and that's something that's in the 6 to 10 year. I don't think it's a next year kind of thing, but it is in that for a long-term plan.
Any other questions, or, so you've touched already on the project plan update?
Well, I think we can
Move right into that then? If it's all right with the board, we're just going to move right to building and grounds and then go into that capital project plan update. So, I mean, if there's any questions or if you want to go over that, Rob?
Well, I kind of think we did here. Really what, originally what I thought about doing was giving you the whole plan and saying, here it is, and giving you time to digest it. And that's probably not the best way, you know. I think bringing it through the committee, and that's what I would recommend that the board do now, is just refer that to the facility committee, give that a once look over, and then our plan would be to do this every year. Facility committee every year reviews and updates the capital projects plan. Sally, Jerome, and I will update a draft that comes to the board, or that comes to the committee. Committee checks it over, moves it on to the board for approval. I think that's the cleanest, best way to get eyes on and vet the proposals that we're moving forward. I think it's a better way than what we've done summer projects in the past by marrying these two plans together. I'm still a little bit concerned from a building fund standpoint. That isn't at the place where I think it needs to be. You know, just like your general fund budget needs to have an interim balance to account for needs and contingencies, your building fund does too. And I think at the very least it should be at the value of what is generated every year. You know, that's about 800,000, and it's just a fraction of that. And I think there needs to be there's a long-term plan for the general fund to get to 13%, and I think there should be a long-term plan to get to 1 or 1.5 times the value of what you're generating every year, just because you have tremendous costs. We have tremendous costs as a district coming, And we need to have more contingency dollars than what we do. If you look at the first 3 years, how we built this was outside of ESSER and outside of the refinance, it's about $650,000 a year. Well, that doesn't leave a lot for, I mean, there are contingencies built in, but that doesn't leave a lot for those big things that could come. You know, Mike was mentioning earlier, you could start a project and all of a sudden realize, well, I guess there's $200,000 more there than what we hoped there would be. That's not a hard scenario to envision. And I think we need to have more contingency dollars in that building fund than we do. But we'll work with what we have. But it is concerning to me, and I think as a board, as a district, we're going to want to think really hard about how we can build that fund as well, because I think it needs to happen. It isn't a bigger priority than I think what we've outlined here, but it's something that long-term we really need to think about. It worries me that there aren't dollars in the building fund to address those big contingencies that we just don't plan for, or can't plan for, because we don't know them.
I don't know if we need a motion or just a consensus that, to move it to committee.
I think either way, you're fine.
Yeah, a consensus that we move the plan to the committee, okay?
And then essentially what the committee will do is review this, and I'd like to probably meet sooner rather than later, because we have summer projects that we want to get started on. So, and luckily in this summer, because we don't have a Gustner project, because that's a bigger project probably than what we can take on it with the building fund dollars that we have. Well, timeline is a little, to get that done in the summer is the bigger issue. And so push that to 2022. So outside of that, we don't have a lot of projects that may need to be bid. So we address that issue, but it's still, these are things that we need to get moving on and rolling. So if we could meet next week sometime, that would probably be good. So we'll post a meeting, and if there's any dates or times that don't work for you, just please let me know right away, and then I can find a time and we can get started for next week.
Okay. Aaron?
Were there any industry lead time issues that we need to take in part consideration when putting this plan together in terms of timing of the projects?
For this summer, I don't think so. I actually tried to, set up what we were going to do for this summer, or what you're going to do for this summer, based on things that would be fairly readily available and wouldn't require a bunch of century code, stuff that you got to comply with or find, design things like that. So, based on the dollars, most of your impact's going to be next year and into those ESSER years, hopefully things, settle down here a little bit. Where we're seeing most of it right now is steel, metal buildings, pre-engineered metal structures are getting a little crazy right now. That affected your athletic facility a little bit when we budgeted that a month ago. I mean, it could all lay down in 2 months. It's hard to say. Personally, I think that's what's going to happen. Industry-wide, what we're seeing is a lot of projects that got put on hold last year. This is especially in our office in Wisconsin, are now going. And I think all these factories have literally gotten a crush of projects. Plus Amazon, some of the Amazon projects going on across the country right now literally hamstrung the bar joist and deck things. I didn't believe it until I actually made some calls. And it hamstrung some of the bar joist and deck stuff for 2 or 3 months until they got those thousands and thousands of square feet pushed out. And the factories are starting to clear that stuff now. So in my experience, usually when somebody tells me it's September or October for things like that, it's going to start improving in a couple months because everybody takes the worst case scenario. But these are interesting times too, so.
I will ask the board how you want to proceed with consolidated construction. I don't think you need to, my opinion is you don't need to go through the process to an RFP process again and the selection process again. I think that agreement would still be from a century code standpoint would still be in place. But I think having the board take some direction on it would be wise, even though you don't have to rebid, having a statement to direct me if that's the direction you want to go, or to go through another selection process, that would take some action as well. But I would just like to have some direction on how you want me to proceed. My recommendation is to continue, but I'd understand how you'd want to proceed.
Heidi?
My feeling with the size of this and scope of this, that we would just continue on. We've had good luck and good experiences with them in the past. And I also think, too, for this committee to, Aaron's had some great questions here. He may have additional questions, and working with them, I think it would be helpful to have them guiding us along the way.
Okay. I think what we'll do is put that on the agenda next meeting, and then we'll make a motion at that time and stuff, so.
Well, I think we'd want to post that topic because it wasn't part of our capital projects plan. I think it's important to lay the foundation, but I think it should be a posted agenda topic before we take action.
Any other questions regarding Aaron?
So just to clarify, we have a agreement in place. We wouldn't have to sign a new contract or do an extension?
Correct. The only reason I ask about direction is that's a different board than this board that signed that agreement, and I think it's important, even though we can continue, that the board gives direction to me to move forward and continue with under that same plan, because you could say, we want to go through this election process again, although I don't recommend it. You certainly could do that if you wanted to go down that route.
Any other questions? None? Okay. Thanks for your time and your report, so.
All right, thanks for having me. Have a great evening.
Yep. Okay, bumping back to activities, is there a motion to approve the Jamestown Regional Medical Center and Jamestown Public School for athletic trainer for 2021-2022 school year with the 3 automatic 1-year renewals? Motion by Gail. Seconded by Greg. Rob?
Just a comment, as a reminder, this is the same agreement that we signed 3 years ago. They provide that athletic training to us at no cost. As part of that agreement, there are some other stipulations that we have, but in the past, we spent around $32,000 annually for this, and this was another example of a really good partnership in our community. We're greatly appreciative of JRMC for making this available to us.
Any other discussion on it? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to Building and Grounds B, is there a motion to approve to submit the school construction application? Motion by Gail, seconded by Greg. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to letter C, is there a motion to approve to submit the facility plan? Motion by Bob, seconded by Gail. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving, we have nothing under curriculum. Moving to under finance, is there a motion to approve the 2021 summer school salary and fee schedule and amended GACDA policy? Motion by Gail, seconded by Heidi. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to letter B, is there a motion for the approval of the James Valley Career and Technology Center agreement? Motion by Heidi, seconded by Aaron. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to letter C, is there a motion to approve the board's notice of recognition with the Jamestown administrators? Motion by Greg, seconded by Gail. Any discussion? Greg?
Well, with the, why does what? I'm not sure I understand your question. It's because that's when the previous agreement ends on June 30th. So they would be recognized to negotiate a new agreement starting on 7/1/2021. Doesn't mean you couldn't negotiate, it just means that that's the beginning of the next term. Yeah, correct.
Prior to-
Yeah, it's pretty standard notice of recognition language.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to letter D, is there a motion for the approval of the board's notice of recognition with the Jamestown Education Association? Motion by Bob. Second by Greg. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to the budget revision. Sally, do you?
The budget revisions, all the details were there. Just either the Title III is an EL program, the revenue was budgeted, but until the determination of what they were spending the funds on. So just bringing forth to you the expense of the Title III program. And the Jamestown, Heidi, our special ed director, applied for a professional development grant through ESSER, so bringing that to the board, and the discretionary grant. Those three items are budget revisions. Title II and ESSER funding, those are just line item budgets. Wanted to bring the ESSER funding to you so that we knew moving forward the remainder of what hasn't been allocated to specific expenditures, what was left in. There might be a few, and there'll have to be a final budget revision, but it gives the board and Dr. Leck a very good idea of the ESSER funding remaining.
Yeah. Yep.
Just a comment with that, you will see final revisions, but that's also where when you move forward with aviations, we had a budget, aviation and drone technology, we had a budget there, that would come out of ESSER 1. So that'll be one other revision that comes, are the costs associated with the aviation program. That program was approved by the state CTE board today. We asked that it be addressed earlier rather than later. Typically, those aren't done until May, but that was approved for us, so now we'll actually get a reimbursement on that equipment cost too. So an even better deal in aviation than we had before. But we have to float the whole cost right away and ask for reimbursement, but a good deal for us.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving into the general fund balance sheet, that's there for your information. If you have any questions on that, you can let Sally know. Moving into monthly financials, motion to approve. Motion by Gail. Seconded by Jason. Any discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to personnel, is there a motion to approve the hire of Denise Wood as math teacher at the high school, salary of $55,522 for the 21-22 school year upon successful background check, salary to be adjusted upon completion of negotiation. Motion by Greg, seconded by Aaron. Any discussion? Diane?
I certainly approve of Miss Wood. She sounds like a wonderful choice. I'm just wondering about Marty Hochhalter. Excuse me for not knowing this, but is she replacing him at the high school and he's moving to Hub?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, right. So essentially, that's a personnel transfer. That's already a continuing contract, so we don't need to bring that to the board. It's simply a transfer. Susanna Walker retired earlier this year. So essentially, Mr. Hochhalter is transferring into her spot, and Mrs. Woods is replacing Mr. Hochhalter. So it's a little bit of a shift, but but it's essentially one position that's being replaced. The others are just shifting into new transfers.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to letter B, is there a motion for the approval of the update technology partner position and the approval of salary for technology partner position? Motion by Gail. Second by Greg. Any discussion?
I just want to update, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. If you remember when we had a resignation from Pam Brown, she was originally in that position. We were hoping to move into a 1.5 position situation. That did not work out. We actually offered Mrs. Brown an opportunity to come back, but we couldn't really come to an agreement on what that might look like. So Nathan was agreeable to taking on those responsibilities, which we're very appreciative of, and I know Mr. Armitage was very strong in the recommendation that he would do an excellent job, which we're appreciative for. And, you know, in fairness, that warrants an increase with the responsibilities, and that's where this whole process takes us to. So we had a resignation at one position. We were hoping to add 1.5 positions, but now we're back to that one position. You know, had we known what kind of work Nathan could do, and if he was able to take on all of those responsibilities, this is the salary we would have offered him back then. So kind of a roundabout way to get to where we got to, but we're happy that he is here and doing good work for us.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Rob?
I'm sorry, I feel the need to point out, normally we include salaries in those motions, and I just want to make note that that position was at 40,000, moved it to 55,000 with those new responsibilities, but that's still a savings to the district in terms of total cost to what we had last year and what we were recommending earlier in this year. So just wanted to make sure that we pointed out that that's the salary change, 40 to 55.
Okay, moving to letter C, is there a motion for the approval to accept the resignation of Sally Mansavage from leave of absence? Motion by Gail, seconded by Heidi. Thank her for service correctly. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving into letter D, we have the superintendent's evaluation. And regarding Century Code, it's a motion for a favorable or unfavorable. So I'm just going to we're going to go into each section for a vote.
Satisfactory, not satisfactory.
Yes, what did I say?
Favorable.
Oh, satisfactory, not satisfactory. So if I could entertain a motion on section 1, goals and vision settings with a rating of 3.74. Jason?
I would move for a satisfactory rating on Section 1 goals and vision setting.
Seconded by Bob. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, Salary?
Gail Nelson. Bob Toso. Aaron Roberts. Greg Allen. Diane Hansen. Roger Hout.
Yes.
Heidi Larson. And Jason Moore. Motion passes 8-0.
Moving to section 2, I'd entertain a motion on board relations, at a rating of 3.64. Bob? Second by Greg. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, Salary?
Bob Toso. Aaron Roberts. Greg Allen. Diane Hansen. Roger Hout.
Yes.
Heidi Larson. Jason Rohr. Gail Nelson. Motion passes 8-0.
Moving to section 3, I'd entertain a motion on human resource management, rating of 3.51. Bob? Second by Aaron. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, Sally?
Greg Allen. Diane Hansen. Roger Hout.
Yes.
Heidi Larson. Jason Rohr. Gail Nelson. Robert Toso. And Aaron Roberts. Motion passes 8-0.
Moving to section 4, entertain a motion on curriculum and student support services at a rating of 3.62. Bob? Seconded by Jason. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, Sally?
Diane Hansen. Roger Hout.
Yes.
Heidi Larson. Jason Rohr. Gail Nelson. Robert Toso. Aaron Roberts. And Greg Allen. Motion passes 8-0.
Moving to section 5, I'd entertain a motion on community relations with a rating of 3.77. Motion by Greg. Second by Jason. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, Sally?
Diane Hansen. Roger Hout.
Yes.
Heidi Larson. Jason Rohr. Gail Nelson. Robert Toso. Aaron Roberts. And Greg Allen. Motion passes 8-0.
Moving to section 6, I'd entertain a motion on operations and resource management at a rating of 3.64. Seconded by Greg. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, Sally?
Roger Hout.
Yes.
Heidi Larson. Jason Rohr. Gail Nelson. Robert Toso. Aaron Roberts. Greg Allen. And Diane Hansen. Motion passes 8-0.
Okay. And then Century Code changed to, I think, 2 years ago. We do not have an overall rating on the evaluation. It's just those sections, so. Moving to policy and procedures, there a motion for the approval to amend jury and witness duty, policy DDEA. Motion by Greg, seconded by Gail. Any discussion? Greg?
So I had this on. If you look at the second paragraph, about halfway down, it starts with, "But shall remit any statutory compensation received for jury duty to the district." And then if you look down to the exempt, they turned that around and took the "to the district" and put it up front, which they're saying the same thing, but for consistency, I think they should be written the same. Just the last part, "to the district," I mean, like I said, it probably doesn't make that much of a difference in what it's saying, but I'm thinking if you're talking exempt and non-exempt, saying the same thing, I think they should be consistently saying the same. And I couldn't see any reason why it would have changed, except that they weren't consistent. I don't know.
So did you make that motion? Okay, so you made the motion to have that correction also?
Yeah, well, yeah, we can
Okay.
include that, just to make them consistent is all.
And Gail, you still second that then? With that, okay. Any other discussion? Great. Or Rob? Oh, here I got it. There you go.
I just want to make sure I understand. The concern is not the content or the context, it's simply the wording. So you just want to change the wording to match what's in the second paragraph, in the first paragraph in exempt. We can do that.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to letter B, is there a motion for the approval to amend federal fiscal compliance policy, HBAA? Motion by Jason. Seconded by Bob. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We have nothing under tuition or other items for,
Mr. President?
Yep.
Sorry. Under other, not to circle back to the board's notice of recognition for JEA. Per Greg's question about the date of 7/1/2021, with that pending legislation of June 1st, would that cause an issue in this policy or no?
So it's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. No, for two reasons. One, the emergency clause didn't pass, so it wouldn't be in place unless the emergency clause was added back in. The second piece of that is it was amended in the Senate before and approved in the Senate to move to July 1. So I don't think that would be the case. Regardless, I would say no, because again, just like my response to Greg's question, you're talking about negotiating the contract, which is set to start on 7/1, because the existing contract ends on 6/30. That's all it's really saying.
okay, moving into items for a future agenda. We have that health and savings plan. If Darren wants to be talking about any other items coming up. If there is, just let Rob or myself know, and we'll try to get it on the agenda. We have meetings to be scheduled here. We have a regular school board meeting on Monday, April 5th, 2021, at 5:15 here in the Thompson Room. We have the National School Board Virtual Conference on April 8th to the 10th coming up. And then another regular school board meeting on Monday, April 19th at 5:15 here and that'll be at the Transition House for a tour, and remainder of the meeting at the library at the high school. And then also, we're moving to Roman numeral 6, executive session to discuss policies. Heidi?
I just had a question on the school board meetings. So the next one is at the transition house, and then we're going to the high school
That's on the 19th.
on the 19th, okay.
Correct.
Okay.
The 5th.
Are we going to do any, like, tour of, like, some of the high school, some of the things that we might need to be done for some of our projects, capital projects?
So it might not be a bad idea if we're up there already. We can do something and we can talk about. We've changed the date a little bit from that transition house. It works better for the instructor, so we just move those dates down the road a little bit. But I'm looking forward to having everybody in the transition house or a new transition house. And yeah, we can try to work something out with viewing the high school, and we won't take you up on the roof, but we can still get a chance to look in there. I don't think we're bonded for that.
Okay. And then moving on to Roman numeral 6, executive session to discuss negotiations for strategy. No conflicts were stated earlier, but if you have a conflict now to declare before we go into executive session, it should be declared now. So, Jason?
I would declare a conflict of interest as my spouse is a teacher in the district.
Okay. Aaron?
Also declare a conflict with my spouse being a
Okay.
teacher in the district.
And then Gail? Okay. Okay. I think we'll just note that, I mean, those are conflicts, and we'll move forward from there. So whoever makes the motion to make sure that those names are not on the motion, so. Is there a motion to move into executive session? Oh,
One comment I'll make with the executive session is I include this on the agenda. Once the notice of recognition has been done, I'll continue to keep possible executive session on the agenda all the way through the agreement. When it's listed on there, it doesn't mean you have to go into executive session or need to have that executive session meeting. It's simply if you want to. I just feel like it should be listed on there as possible at every meeting. So that's why it's on there.
that's why it's good, I mean, to declare right before is probably the best way to do it then, so, versus declaring if we're not going in, so. Heidi, you have a motion, or? Okay. Yep, because they're gonna have a conflict, yep.
I, Heidi Larson, believe that the discussion with our negotiations and developing a strategy relative to the school board's petition in this matter in open session would have an adverse fiscal effect on negotiations position of the board. Therefore, I move that the board enter into executive session and that the following members and negotiators be identified as being present. School board members Greg Allen, Diane Hansen, well, this is not here, Roger Hout, Heidi Larson, and Robert Toso. Superintendent Robert Leck and Business Manager Sally O's. The date and time are, it's the March 15th at 6:54 p.m. That only the following topic will be considered in executive session: negotiations strategies. That the legal authority for the executive session is Section 44-04-19.1 of the North Dakota Century Code. That the executive session be recorded.
Is there a second? Seconded by Greg. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Then once we're done with the executive session, we'll be back in here to close the regular meeting, so.